So let's kick off this module by seeing some of the different ways we can run ancillary code before and after tests. So in this first demo, we're going to see how we can run code before and after each test in the test fixture. So let's head over to Visual Studio. And here we've got this memory calculator tests class. And here we can see we've got a couple of tests, should add and should subtract. And we've created our system under test here in a field inside the class. And we're just creating an instance of this memory calculator here at the class level. So let's go ahead and run this should add test. So here we're adding the value 10 and then adding the value 5, and then we're asserting that we get the result of 15. So let's run this should add test, and it passes as expected. We also have this should subtract test, and here we're just subtracting 5, and then we're asserting that we end up with -5. So if we run this, again this test passes. But if we try and run both of these tests in a single test run, one of them will fail. So we can see that the should subtract test here has failed, and if we look at the failure message, we expected -5, but we actually got 10. And this is because we're only creating this instance once each time we execute this test fixture. So we get our should add test execute, and this will pass. But at this point, the memory stored in our memory calculator instance here is equal to 15. So when the next test runs, we're subtracting 5 from 15, which means we get this value 10 here, and our test fails. And this is because we're not creating a new instance of our system under test for every test that executes within this test fixture. So we could move this declaration down and declare it multiple times in each test, or alternatively we can make use of some of the NUnit attributes. So the first attribute we're going to look at is the NUnit setup attribute. We can apply this to a method to indicate to the test runner that the method should execute before each test in the test fixture executes. So let's go and create a method here. And this method I've just called before each test, but you can choose a different method name if you wish. And here in this method, the most important thing is we're creating a new instance of our memory calculator. So because this before each test method will execute before the should add method and before the should subtract method, we're going to get a brand new system under test each time any of these tests execute. So that means we can also remove this initialization here. In this setup method here, I've also got this console write line, and we're just outputting that we're executing before the current test name. And here we're using NUnit's test context class, which provides a number of useful features. So we can get access to the current context of the executing test run, and once we've got access to that, we can access items such as the current test that's executing, and here we're just getting the name. But we can also access things like the test directory and working directory. So if you're doing any file I/O-based tests, you may wish to look at the test directory or work directory to help you get to the correct path for your tests. So now we've got our setup method. Let's build, and we'll go and run all of the tests in this test fixture. Notice that firstly both tests now pass because we're getting a brand new instance of our system under test before each of these tests run. If we also have a look at our test output window here, we can see that we've got our console write lines executing here. So we've got our before should add. So this is coming from our setup method here, before should add. And we've also got this method executing before the should subtract method. So now our setup method will execute before each and every test within this test fixture. There's also a complementary attribute called tear down, and this does the opposite of the setup attribute in that it runs after each test executes. So let's go and add a method for this attribute, and again we're using after each test as a method name, but you can use your own convention if you wish. And again we've got our console write line here, and we're just instead saying after the name of the test that's just executed. And in our example here of this memory calculator, it doesn't matter if we don't do any cleanup activities, but we can use this teardown attribute on a method to clean up after each test if we need to. So I'm just setting this to null for demo purposes, but we don't actually have to in this case. So let's run all of the tests in this test fixture again, and they pass as expected. But if we have a look at our test output here, we can now see that we've got this method executing before add, so this is our setup method, and after should add, this is our teardown method here. And we've also got before should subtract and after should subtract. So that's how we can use the setup attribute and the teardown attribute to execute code before and after each test in the test fixture.